Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So a priest was walking down the street when a hooker on the corner called out, "Hey, Father, you want a quickie? Only $5. The priest said, "No thanks," and hurried on his way. A few moments later, another woman called from a doorway, "Hey, Father, you want a quickie? Only $5. Once again, the priest replied, "No thanks," and picked up his pace. Further down the street, a third woman leaned out of a window and shouted,
"Hey, Father, you want a quickie?"
"Only $5. The priest, looking more confused than ever, said, "No thanks," and rushed back to his parish. When he got there, he approached one of the nuns and asked, "Sister, what's a quickie?" Without missing a beat, she replied, $5, same as in town. So a man and woman had been married for 30 years, and during all that time, they always kept the lights off whenever they made love. The husband was embarrassed and afraid he couldn't satisfy her, so he secretly used a big dildo without her knowing. This went on for years, until one night she finally reached over and flipped the light switch on. She gasped when she saw him holding the dildo and shouted, "I knew it. You jerk, explain the dildo." He looked back and said, "Explain the kids." So when the ark's door was finally closed, Noah called a meeting with all the animals. "Listen up," Noah said in a commanding voice. "There will be no sex on this trip. All you males, take off your peckers and hand them in to my sons. I'll sit over there and write you a receipt. Once we see land, you can get your pecker back." After about a week, Mr. Rabbit stormed into his wife's cage, looking very excited. "Quick," he said, "get on my shoulders and look out the window. See if there's any land out there." Mrs. Rabbit climbed onto his shoulders and peered out. "Nope, no land yet." "Damn," said Mr. Rabbit as he hopped away. This went on every day until Mrs. Rabbit couldn't take it anymore. "What's wrong with you?" she snapped. "It's going to rain for 40 days and nights. Only after the water drains will we see land. Why are you acting so excited every day?" Mr. Rabbit grinned slyly and held up a piece of paper. "Look, I got the horse's receipt." So, a very nice, innocent Australian woman wanted to get married, but she is only willing to marry a man if he has never been with another woman. After several years of searching, she decides to take out a personal ad. She ends up corresponding with Tommy Greer, who has lived his whole life in the Australian outback and has had no experience with women. They meet, and she is very happy with him. She feels that they are perfect for each other, and they end up getting married. On their wedding night, she goes into the bathroom and prepares for the evening. When she returns to the bedroom, she finds her husband standing in the middle of the room naked. All the furniture is piled in one corner. "What's going on?" she asks. "I've never been with a woman," he says. "But if it's anything like a kangaroo, I'm going to need all the room I can get." So one day, a kindergarten teacher said to her class of 5-year-olds, "I'll give $2 to the child who can tell me the most famous man who ever lived." An Irish boy raised his hand and said, "It was St. Patrick." The teacher smiled and said, "Sorry, that's not correct." Then a Scottish boy raised his hand and said, "It was St. Andrew." The teacher shook her head and replied, "I'm sorry, that's not right either." Finally, a little Jewish boy raised his hand and said, "It was Jesus Christ." The teacher beamed and said, "That's absolutely correct, Marvin. Come up here and get your $2. As she handed him the money, the teacher added, "You know, Marvin, I'm surprised you said Jesus Christ, considering you're Jewish." Marvin grinned and replied in my heart, "I knew it was Moses, but business is business." So a woman walked into a Lexus dealership to browse and spotted the most beautiful, fully loaded Lexus on the showroom floor. She walked over to inspect it, and as she bent down to feel the fine leather upholstery, an unexpected fart slipped out. Embarrassed, she quickly looked around to see if anyone had noticed. Sure enough, a salesman was standing right behind her. With a pleasant smile, he said, "Good day, miss. How can I assist you today?" Trying to keep her composure, she smiled back and asked, "Sir, what is the price of this gorgeous vehicle?" The salesman, still smiling, leaned in and said, "Miss, if you farted just touching it, you're gonna shit when you hear the price." So a comedian gets a gig at an old age home. The director says, "Listen, we're thrilled that you're here. It's very rare that we get entertainment. You see, everyone here has Alzheimer's." The comedian says, "Well, that doesn't sound too good." "No," says the director. "They'll love you. You'll see. They will be so happy to get some entertainment. Please, just give it a try. You'll see." So the comedian goes out and tells his first joke. Big laugh. Huge. He thinks, well, that's a good start. So he decides to tell the same joke again. This time, he gets an even bigger laugh. So he tells it again. Gigantic laugh. The audience is falling out of their seats. He tells the same joke a few more times. Each time he gets an even bigger response. The whole time there's a guy in the back watching the show, but not laughing, just sitting there, rubbing his chin. Finally, the comedian tells the same joke one last time and says, "Good night, everybody." Thunderous applause. Huge standing ovation. As he's leaving, the comedian walks past the guy in the back. The guy says, "That's quite a show you just did there." The comedian says, "Thank you very much." The guy says, "Let me ask you something. How do you remember all of those jokes?" So, a priest wants to go on vacation. So he calls his rabbi friend and asks if he would handle his parish for a month. The rabbi replies, "I guess. I can definitely handle the sermons, as I'll just preach from the Old Testament, but I wouldn't have a clue what to do with the confessional." "Confessions are easy," the priest says. "Just watch me and you'll get the idea." So the priest goes in the confession box, and a woman comes up. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I slept with 2 men." The priest replies, "Say 2 Hail Marys, put $1 in the collection box, and you will be forgiven." The woman thanks him and leaves. The next woman comes up. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I slept with 2 men." The priest replies, "Say 2 Hail Marys, put $1 in the collection box, and you will be forgiven." The woman thanks him and leaves. The next woman approaches. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I slept with 2 men." The priest replies, "Say 2 Hail Marys, put $1 in the collection box, and you will be forgiven." The woman thanks him and leaves. "This is easy," the rabbi says. "I can handle it. You take the next one, and I'll watch," the priest replies. So the rabbi goes in the confession box, and the next woman approaches. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I slept with a man." The rabbi replies, "So, sleep with another. They're 2 for $1. So a couple guys decide to stop at a saloon on their way through a small town. It's a crowded dive of a place, and the only place to sit was a couple stools next to a spittoon. Bill and Larry were looking forward to some drinks, so they belly up. It quickly became apparent why no one wanted to sit there, as the tobacco-chewing regulars were constantly coming up to use the spittoon. Both guys are 3 sheets to the wind when Bill tells Larry he'll give him $20 if he takes a single swig out of the spittoon. Larry replies, "Hell no. That's disgusting, and there's no way I'm doing that for $20. So Bill asked, "What if I offered you $50? Larry replied, "As much as I could use the money, it's still not worth it. That shit is foul." "Okay," said Bill, "but would you do it for $100? Larry thinks for a minute and decides to go for it. He picks up the spittoon, tips it, and takes a slurp. He keeps slurping and slurping, gagging with every swallow until the spittoon is empty. He slams down the spittoon, wipes his mouth, and, looking a little green around the gills, holds out his hand for the money. Bill says, "Here's your $100. But why in the hell did you drink all of it when all you had to do was take 1 sip? Larry replied, "I couldn't stop. It was all one piece." So Brigham Young was strolling down the streets of Salt Lake City one morning, admiring the utopia he and his people had built out of the wilderness in just a few short years. As he walked, a cute little blonde, blue-eyed girl ran up to him. Brother Brigham, you don't know me, but I'm one of your daughters." "How nice," said Brigham Young, smiling. He handed her a nickel and said, "Go buy yourself some ice cream." "Thank you, sir," she replied, skipping away. Brigham continued his walk, and soon a handsome teenage boy approached him. "Brother Brigham, sir, you don't know me, but I'm one of your sons." "Delightful," said Brigham Young, pulling out $1. "Here, go buy yourself a nice new Bible to read at church this Sunday." "Thank you, sir," the boy said, hurrying off to buy a new Bible. A little farther down the road, in a rougher part of town, a young black boy came up to him. "Brother Brigham, you don't know me, but my mama says I'm one of your kids." Brigham looked around nervously, then leaned down, reached into his pocket, and pulled out all the cash he had. "Here's $10, kid," he whispered. "Just don't tell anyone." So Jesus and St. Peter were walking along the shores of Lake Galilee when Peter noticed something out in the lake. "What's that, Lord?" he asked. "It's an oil rig," Jesus replied. "Would you like to visit it?" "Sure," says Peter. "Follow me," says Jesus. About 50 yards out, Peter was up to his neck in water, and Jesus was walking on the water. "I can't go further, Lord. I'll drown," says Peter. "Do what I'm doing," says Jesus. "What's that, Lord?" asks Peter. "I'm walking on the pipeline, you idiot." So a gentleman had too much alcohol at a party. He was heading home and was pulled over by a state trooper. Upon being tested, the fellow couldn't walk a straight line any more than he could drive one. So the trooper wrote out a ticket and had just given it to the driver before an accident in the opposite lane took his attention to more important matters. The inebriated driver, figuring that the trooper wasn't coming back to him, drove home and went to bed. However, the next morning, there was a knock at the gentleman's door. When he answered it, he was surprised to see the same state trooper who had pulled him over the night before. "Are you Mr. Johnson?" asked the trooper. The gentleman nodded nervously. "Were you pulled over at Main Street last night for driving under the influence?" asked the trooper. Again, the gentleman nodded. "And what did you do then?" asked the trooper, a stern look on his face. The gentleman hesitated for a moment before admitting that he had driven his car home and gone straight to bed. "Where's your car now?" asked the trooper. The gentleman pointed towards the garage and said, "It's in there." The trooper then asked, "May we see the car?" The man answered, "Sure," and opened the garage. Inside the garage was the state trooper's car. So John is a houseboy who drinks his boss's wine with impunity and then adds water to cover his tracks. His boss became suspicious and decided to buy pasties, a French wine that changes color if you add water. Unaware of this, John drank from the wine as usual and topped it up with water. Immediately, he added water. The pasties became milky and he knew he was in trouble. When the boss came back and saw the changed pasties, he knew he had nailed the thief. John, knowing he was in trouble, decided to stay put in the kitchen when his boss came home. The boss, having told his wife what he observed, now swung into action. "John," he called from the sitting room. He answered, "Yes, boss." "Who drank my pasties?" John did not answer. The boss asked again, yet still no answer. Then the boss went to the kitchen to meet him there. "Are you insane or what? Why, when I called, you answered, 'Yes, boss,' but when I ask you a question, you don't answer me." John retorted, "When you're in the kitchen, you don't understand anything at all, except your name." "Is that so?" asked the boss. "Okay, go to the bar stand beside Madam while I go into the kitchen, and then you ask me a question." John accepted. When his boss was in the kitchen, he shouted, "Boss." "Yes, John." Boss answers. John then asks, "Who goes into the maid's bedroom when Madam is not at home?" No answer. The boy shouted again, "Boss, I say, who sneaks into the maid's room when Madam is not in the house?" No answer. The boss runs back from the kitchen shouting, "Wonders shall never cease." "John, it is true, when one is in the kitchen, one does not hear anything except one's name." The wife, now very angry, interrupted, "That's not true. It's a lie." Without argument, John asked if she'll enter the magic kitchen to be tested. She agreed. John asks, "Madam, who's Junior's biological father? Me or the boss?" Madam rushed out of the kitchen yelling, "This kitchen needs to be renovated." So once upon a time there lived an extremely wealthy 60-year-old widower named Bob. One fine day, Bob strolled into the local country club, arm in arm with a stunning hot 25-year-old blonde. This young lady, with her captivating charm and irresistible sex appeal, left everyone at the club speechless. Bob's friends, who were all well past their prime, couldn't help but notice the alluring young woman hanging on Bob's every word. They were utterly bewildered and just had to know how Bob managed to snag such a trophy girlfriend. As soon as they could corner him, they asked, "Bob, how in the world did you get the trophy girlfriend?" Bob, with a sly grin, replied, "Girlfriend? She's my wife." The group of friends were flabbergasted, but still managed to stammer out, "So, how did you convince her to marry you?" Bob, clearly enjoying their astonishment, replied, "I lied about my age." "What? Did you tell her you were only 50? One of his friends inquired. Bob simply smiled and said, "No, I told her I was 90. So a man was riding the train across the country when suddenly everything started rocking violently. People were being thrown out of their seats and luggage was flying everywhere. Then, as suddenly as it started, everything is back to the calm, smooth ride he was used to. Everyone sorted themselves out and found seats again. When they reached the next stop, the man went forward to the engine car and asked the conductor what had happened. The conductor replied, "We hit a lawyer." The man couldn't believe it. You mean hitting a person caused that? The conductor looked at him and explained well he was in the ditch, but we got him anyways. So 2 college students accidentally missed the math final exam. The next day, they both went to plead with their professor. He was feeling pretty good that day, so he allowed them to retake it. He told them to both come back tomorrow for an oral exam. When they both showed up, he told one of them to wait outside while he tests the other. So one enters and the other puts his ear to the door to listen. The professor begins asking the question, "You are riding in a train cart and you get too hot. What do you do?" The student replies, "I open the window." "Okay, now that window is 2 feet wide and 3 feet high. The train is traveling 50 miles per hour, going north, and the wind is blowing at 15 miles per hour due east. How long will it take for new air to replace the old air in the cart?" The student is clearly confused at this impossible question and just answers, "I don't know." So the professor gives him an F, dismisses him, and calls in his friend. He begins asking his friend, "You are riding in a train cart and it gets too hot. What do you do?" He says, "I will take my jacket off." "Okay, but it's still too hot. What do you do?" "I take my shirt off." "I understand, but it's very, very hot. I will just get naked." "Okay, but there's a guy in front of you getting a hard-on by watching you strip naked." The student replies, "Professor, the entire train can screw me in the rear. I am not opening that window." So a Jewish woman wants to take her dog to Israel, so she goes to the travel agent to find out how. He says, "It's easy. You go to the airline. They give you a kennel. You put your dog in it. When you get off at Tel Aviv, go to the luggage rack, and there's your dog." So she does. Gets off at Tel Aviv, goes to the luggage rack. No dog. She goes to the lost and found. Says, "Where's my dog?" They look all over the airport for it and find the dog in another terminal. Only the dog is dead. "Oh my gosh," they say, "we killed this woman's dog. What are we going to do?" Then one says, "Wait a minute, it's a Cocker Spaniel. They're common dogs. There's a pet shop across the street from the airport. We'll get the same size, shape, color, sex. She'll never know the difference." They bring the woman the other dog, and she says, "That's not my dog." Laughingly and making light of it, they say, "What do you mean that's not your dog?" And she says, "My dog's dead. I was taking it to Israel to bury it." So a new business was opening, and one of the owner's friends wanted to send him flowers for the occasion. They arrived at the new business site, and the owner read the card, which said, "Rest in peace." The owner was angry and called the florist to complain. After he had told the florist of the obvious mistake and how angry he was, the florist replied, "Sir, I'm really sorry for the mistake, but rather than getting angry, you should imagine this somewhere. There is a funeral taking place today, and they have flowers with a note saying, 'Congratulations on your new location.'" So, a young woman visits a florist to get some flowers for her mother. As she's perusing, she notices the most gorgeous rose she's ever seen sitting next to the cashier and asks for its price. "Oh, sorry," the cashier replies. "That one's not for sale. I got that as a gift from a fellow florist for hooking him up with a woman I met yesterday." "Yesterday?" she gasps. "How did they hit it off so quickly?" "Well, he's a handsome man and a wonderful lover, for one. He's a really nice guy, of course. And, to top it off," he says, leaning into a whisper, "he's got a 10-inch monster." She giggles, blushing. Sounds like a catch. Where can I find him? He's just a block over. But fair warning, he's only interested in women named after flowers. So if I ever meet a woman with a flowery name, I send her his way. He points at the rose. Then he sends me the flower as a thank you. Yesterday was rose. A week ago, I recommended violet to him, he says, indicating a slightly wilted violet in a vase behind him. The woman thanks him and leaves, bitterly cursing her own name. Nevertheless, she visits the well-endowed florist shop. Stepping up to the counter, she pointedly says, "I heard you are particularly skilled in certain areas." He smirks. "So I have been told. And who might you be?" She grins. "I was referred by your friend down the street. Perhaps you can assist me." "Perhaps," he says, "but tell me, what is your name?" She hesitates. Then, pouting slightly, she replies, "Kristen, but everyone calls me Chris." His smile falters, and his head sinks as he shakes his head. Chris's heart drops, knowing she's blown her chance. "Well then, if it's not too much trouble, I'd like some flowers for my mother." "Of course. What kind of—" Suddenly, he brightens up again. Without another word, he locks the shop door, swoops upon her, and takes her into his arms. 3 hours of mind-altering fun later, she bids him goodbye with a kiss as he presents a complimentary bouquet for her mother. "And please," he says, "tell your sweet mama she is welcome to as many flowers from my shop as she would like." Flustered with ecstasy, she promises to convey the message and calls her mother that night to tell her everything. The next day, Chris feels incredible and stops by the original florist's shop. "I just wanted to thank you for telling me about that dashing gentleman. He was amazing." He smiles sheepishly. "I suppose I should thank you too. I just got another beautiful flower for recommending you to him." "Really? What flower could he have possibly sent that was named after me?" The florist sighs. "Chrysanthemum."